Welcome to Facts TV News, where everything is true. Internal conflict theorized in Parkland double murder. The murder tied in the St. Andrew North Police Division shifted to the Parkland community on Tuesday after men reported posing as cops killed two men, setting off fresh fears in the crime hotspot. The deceased have been identified as 40-year-old Patrick Indon Thompson and Yawan Gunnar Green, both of the low-income Kingston 19 neighborhood. They were shot fatally about midnight. Probe underway into police shooting of Cabby. The Independent Commission of Investigations has commenced a probe into the shooting of a taxi operator by the police on Darkins Drive in Portmore, St. Catherine on Tuesday. Several taxi operators withdrew their services shortly after the incident, inconveniencing commuters who were stranded in the vicinity of the Portmore Mall. Reports are that about 10:20 a.m., a team of cops attempted to arrest the cabby when he was shot in the shoulder. The incident was captured on amateur video and shows the operator on the ground bleeding. He was hospitalized. However, his injury is not considered life-threatening, said Senior Superintendent Christopher Phillips, head of the St. Catherine South Police Division. The senior cop noted that while the shooting and subsequent protests were unfortunate, the incident provided an opportunity to build out a stronger relationship between the taxi operators. The cabbies welcomed the decision to meet with the police at a later date. Unfair traffic ticketing and abuse are expected to be high on the agenda. Displaying a ticket for $2,500 for parking without a prohibited distance from a bus stop, a taxi driver lamented being targeted by the police up to 4 times per day. Them not given nowhere to park. We not obstruct nobody. We are taximan, we are no gunman, the cab driver stated, who asked that his identity be withheld. Phillips acknowledged that the transport operators' grievance, including concerns about parking accommodation and personal security, have been aired for some time. Regarding Tuesday's incident, Phillips said the preliminary assessments were that a vehicle that allegedly hit a cop from a motorcycle last week was intercepted. A tussle ensued between the driver and the cop. The policeman sustained injuries, Phillips said. No details were given about those injuries. Cops pledge to quell Western crime wave by June. A surge in violent crime in Western Jamaica has forced the police to pivot and launch a series of operations, Jamaica's police commissioner has said. That response was initial over the last week to rein in murders in Area 1, covering parishes in that region, which represents 35% of homicides nationally. Citing the trend as our major concern, Major General Anthony Anderson said the constabulary expects to quell the upsurge in the April to June quarter. We are targeting some of the people we know are carrying out violence, but also occupying the spaces and also the routes that they normally use, using not only our traditional techniques, but we have been using some technology in that space, and that is why I am reasonably confident that over this quarter, we should see a change in what is happening in the West, Anderson said during a Jamaica Constabulary Force press conference Tuesday afternoon. Since school reopens for face-to-face classes after the midterm break, there have been a number of violent incidents among students, some of which the commissioner said have their genesis in gang conflicts that have spilled out into the streets. To address the challenge, particularly in Area 1, the JCF has trained and deployed an additional 55 school resource officers. We don't intend to put police officers in every school, and we shouldn't have to, but it is important to train more of our members to support and help school administrators deal with the challenges of violence that they are facing, he said. Anderson added that the force will also seek to improve the quality and volume of mentorship in the youth in communities across Jamaica. Jamaica has recorded an 8.5% reduction in major crimes for the first quarter of the year. As of March 1, murders were down by 3%, while shooting declined by 16%. 71% of homicides have been attributed to gang violence and 16% to interpersonal disputes. Let prisoners work to feed themselves, says rights advocate. With many Jamaicans rippling over, footing the $500 million food bill for prison inmates annually, Stand Up for Jamaica's Executive Director, Carla Golotto, is battling for pay apprenticeships for prisoners. However, a former correctional boss says, while this is allowed under Jamaican law, it poses logistical and other challenges, particularly in relation to high-risk convicts. Golotto, in a letter to reporters on Tuesday, said it is no secret that feeding prisoners has been a vexed issue for Jamaicans over the years, with most, if not all, thinking that the inmates should work to pay their debts to society and feed themselves. She said, though, that the vexed issue has a solution to prison labor, which is common globally and has shown remarkable results. There have been calls for the better rehabilitation system in Jamaica in an effort to address the issue of recidivism. Without proper rehabilitation, Jamaica will continue to face the crime crisis they face today. As a society, we need to address the culture where we believe that criminals cannot be rehabilitated. This mindset makes returning to normal society an uphill task. Maintaining prison labor that gives prisoners jobs helps them to earn to fund their prison stay and also gives them skills in finding legitimate work upon release, the rights advocate stated. Former Commissioner of Corrections, Major Richard Rees, commenting on the proposal, said he was in agreement but argued that it was not as clear-cut. The law makes provision for what she is saying. The regime is inbuilt. Just like her, I agree that prisoners should work, but when you put something into practice, sometimes it's not always possible. For an internal work regime, you wouldn't really have much of a problem if you have sufficient work. Like you have sanitization, farming, the kitchen, you have the tailor shop, so there are some of these that exist, Major Rees stated. When you go for the external work programs, you have to look at low-risk inmates because you can't have the high-risk prisoners out there. And if you have the medium to high-risk prisoners as well as the cost of the security arrangements, the external transportation is another factor, added Rees, who served as Commissioner of Corrections from June 2003 to November 2008. Let's say you are taking them to bush a highway, which I have done in my time. When you look at the logistical and security arrangements and cost, because of the profile of the inmates available to work, you would not be able to deploy them because of the cost and, regrettably, the vast number of murders of inmates. Even if they are not on life sentences, their security classification is such that the risk factor would warrant certain levels of security, he noted. So let's say you are going to bush the cemetery by the Horizon Remand Center. You don't need much logistical support because it's right beside the prison. But if you're going to bush a highway, to have to get them there, you have to supervise the work and you have to have a security team. Oftentimes, the public at large will sit back and say, these people are there, we are feeding them, but you would now have to have prison industries in order to engage them, he noted. Rees said there were several options that would have to be considered to create real change. For example, we would now have to look at garment manufacturing to supply a given market. If you look at China, for instance, China has very huge prison industries. You have to also look at economies of scale in terms of what the cost is effective and practical, he noted. According to Rees, what Golotto is pointing to is rehabilitation philosophy and general policy. But when you put it into practice now, it requires a lot more. Sometimes you have to be careful that your emotions don't trigger your convictions. You visit every day and you see these people are not engaged, but it also takes a certain amount of capital in order to bring that into practice, he pointed out. The current infrastructure and building of the prisons, except for the South Camp Road facility in the corporate era, he said, are not purpose-built. They may have been purpose-built in the 1800s, but they are certainly not purpose-built for efficiency. There has always been debate about building new correctional facilities. These are political considerations, but if we were to modernize the infrastructure, maybe in 5-6 years, you would recover the capital cost because your operational cost in terms of staffing, utility, security would be far less, he noted. When they used to take out prisoners to do the quarrying work out by Rockford, in their days it was more geared towards being penal or punitive. It wasn't necessarily business compliant. Some persons' perspective is, give them out there in the sun and work them, but you have to look at whether this is beneficial, who is it beneficial to, and what is the outcome, he asked. He also shared that Gullett's view that a prison labor program would require infrastructure and guarantee markets and economies of scale. It would be training production and profitability. It doesn't have to be highly profitable, but turnover. In the meantime, he said it is for the state to show the political will to move forward with plans to build new facilities, which have been mooted across administrations. The key thing is a critical policy position to commit to building new facility, which can be done on a phased basis. It would reduce the utilities and the staff to inmate ratio, restated. My greatest fear when I was commissioner was that if there was ever an earthquake or a fire because of the aged infrastructure, I know that would have been catastrophic, both staff and inmates, he said. Earlier this year, reporters found that in 2020, it cost $13,000 to feed one inmate per month, and the island's prison population currently amounts to over 3,700. There are 2 farm prisons in Jamaica, Tamarind Farm Adult Correctional Center in St. Catherine and Richmond Farm Adult Correctional Center in St. Mary. But sources told reporters that there is still very little taking place in terms of work and productivity on the farms which mostly lie fallen. In the meantime, at least one correctional officer has raised concern about the dietary needs of inmates who suffer from diabetes and hypertension. We are supposed to have nutritionists and doctors who screen and make recommendations for certain inmates with medical conditions. But from what I have observed, they are just here feed on what is there, and the daily menu leaves a lot to be desired, the correctional officer noted. On Tuesday, Goleta said, it's time to re-examine the message we are currently sending to and about some of the most vulnerable members of our society through the prison food system. Food is an integral part of our human existence. It nourishes us, communicates who we are, our relationships, and reflects our values. Please remember to subscribe, like, share, and click the notification bell for daily updates.